At 60 years old, I learned that walls don't just have ears, they have a way of crashing down on you when you least expect it. My name is Nora, and for 35 consecutive years, the towering, white brick, colonial house on Willow Creek Lane wasn't just a piece of prime real estate in an affluent Connecticut suburb. It was the physical monument of my sweat, my tears, and my absolute devotion. It was the home where my late husband, Hugh, and I spent decades building a life from nothing. We had painted every room ourselves, we had planted the oak tree in the front yard when it was just a fragile sapling. Most importantly, it was the sanctuary where we raised our only son, Brendan. When Hugh passed away unexpectedly 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack, that 4-bedroom house became my psychological anchor. It was my quiet safe haven. It was explicitly meant to be the grand legacy that I would eventually hand down to Brendan and his family. I lived there alone, maintaining its pristine gardens and polished hardwood floors, keeping it perfect for the day Brendan would take it over. Instead, it became the exact currency I had to use to buy back my stolen dignity. The rot in our family dynamics didn't manifest overnight, it crept in silently, solidifying the very day Brendan married Stacey. From the moment the wedding planning began, I made a conscious, ironclad vow to myself to be the most supportive, hands-off, and non-intrusive mother-in-law possible. I had seen too many families destroyed by overbearing parents. I consciously gave them their space, never dropped by their downtown townhouse unannounced, and even provided them with a massive 6-figure down payment so they wouldn't be drowned in mortgage debt from day one. But Stacey's family, specifically her fiercely manipulative mother and her sisters, were an entirely different breed of human beings. They were loud, deeply materialistic, hyper-demanding, and from day one, they viewed my son Brendan not as a partner to Stacey, but as a walking corporate ATM and a personal, on-call chauffeur. Brendan's own sister, Lena, had warned him multiple times before the wedding, telling him that Stacey was draining his focus. But Brendan was too blinded by infatuation to listen to his sister. Whenever Brendan and Stacey planned a weekend dinner, a minor holiday celebration, or a casual backyard barbecue, Stacey's mother was positioned firmly at the center of the universe, orchestrating the entire event, dictating the menu, and ensuring that her own family was completely catered to. Meanwhile, I was systematically treated like a piece of living room furniture, an afterthought hidden in plain sight. My invitations were always last minute, extended via a cold text message from Stacey rather than a phone call from my son. And more often than not, those invitations were followed by a polite, passive-aggressive cancellation notice. "Hey Nora, turns out Mom's back is acting up again, so we're just going to do a quiet, intimate dinner with her tonight. We'll catch up next time." I swallowed my pride every single time. I choked down the bitter pill of isolation because I loved my son fiercely, and I was willing to endure any amount of personal marginalization just to ensure his domestic happiness remained intact. The true architecture of this betrayal began to take shape exactly 3 months ago. For over a year, Brendan had been talking passionately about planning a grand, once-in-a-lifetime family vacation. He knew with absolute certainty that my deepest lifelong dream was to see the historic sun-drenched coastlines of Amalfi, Sorrento, and Rome. It was a dream Hugh and I had deferred for decades while saving for Brendan's Ivy League tuition. Brendan and I had sat on my porch on hot summer nights since he was a teenager, looking through travel magazines, mapping out the ruins we would walk through and the small Italian cafes where we would drink espresso. He had explicitly promised me, over and over again, that as soon as his corporate tech consulting bonuses cleared, he was going to fund a massive, unified family trip where we could finally experience Italy together. Then, around the beginning of spring, Brendan grew strangely, defensively quiet about the entire plan. Whenever we sat down for our increasingly brief weekly lunches, and I enthusiastically brought up the Italian travel itineraries I had been researching, his eyes would dart away. He would nervously clear his throat, fidget with his watch, and brush it off with a heavy sigh. "Work is just incredibly stressful right now, Mom," he would tell me, his voice strained with what I thought was genuine exhaustion. "The tech market is volatile, and Stacey and I are realizing that money is just incredibly tight right now. We've had to put the whole Italy vacation concept on the absolute back burner. Honestly, We're just trying to keep our heads above water with our monthly expenses. My maternal instincts immediately kicked into overdrive, filled with deep sympathy and worry for my son's financial well-being. I felt absolutely terrible seeing him look so burdened. If my son was drowning in stress, it was my duty to lift him up. I immediately looked for ways to alleviate his financial pressure so he could breathe easier. I began cooking massive, elaborate multi-course meals every single week, packing them into expensive glass containers, and driving them over to their townhouse just so they wouldn't have to spend a dime on dining out. I went to the premium organic grocery stores, spending hundreds of dollars of my own fixed income every week to completely stock their pantry and refrigerator. I went even further. I explicitly told Brendan that I would take over their monthly luxury car insurance payments and their residential utility bills for the foreseeable future. "Let me do this for you, Brendan," I had told him, gently patting his hand across the kitchen island. "You're working yourself to the bone. Use the money you would have spent on these bills to build your savings back up. Your mother has your back." He had looked me dead in the eyes, smiled a sweet, appreciative smile, and said, "You're a lifesaver, Mom. I don't know what we'd do without your help right now." I went home that night feeling a deep sense of maternal purpose. I was glad my financial sacrifices were giving my son the breathing room he so desperately needed. 3 weeks later, Brendan called me to let me know that he and Stacy would be completely out of pocket for the upcoming week. He explained, with an immense amount of technical detail, that his firm was hosting a high-stakes, mandatory corporate tech retreat and leadership seminar in downtown Chicago. He emphasized that the schedule was incredibly rigorous. 16-hour days filled with back-to-back workshops, high-level networking dinners, and completely packed schedules. "The firm is keeping us locked in a conference center, Mom," Brendan had warned me over the phone. "The cell service in the lower levels of the hotel is notoriously terrible, and they have a strict no-device policy during the executive seminars. Don't worry if I'm completely dark for the next 7 to 8 days. I'll text you the second I land back in Connecticut." Stacy, who usually documented every single hour of her life on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, went completely silent. Not a single photo, story, or status update was posted. I thought nothing of it. I simply assumed she was accompanying him and playing the role of the supportive corporate spouse, too busy attending networking mixes to post online. The house on Willow Creek Lane felt exceptionally quiet that week, but my heart was full of pride. My son was climbing the corporate ladder, making something of himself, and working hard to secure his future. On a bright Tuesday afternoon, right in the middle of their supposed Chicago trip, I decided to drive to the medical plaza to see my longtime physician, Dr. Ingram, for a routine health checkup. Dr. Ingram had been our family doctor for 20 years and knew Hugh, Brendan, and me very well. After completing my appointment with Dr. Ingram, who confirmed I was in absolute perfect health for a 60-year-old woman, I decided to walk into the attached upscale cafe section to grab an iced tea before driving home. The cafe was relatively quiet, filled only with the soft hum of an espresso machine and the low murmur of upscale shoppers. As I stood near the velvet rope waiting for the barista, a familiar, high-pitched, incredibly shrill laugh cut through the air from the corner booth. I froze. I turned my head slightly and instantly recognized the woman sitting there. It was Stacy's maternal aunt. She was sitting with a local friend of hers, a massive designer shopping bag resting against her knee, and an expensive iPad propped up on the marble table in front of her. She was enthusiastically swiping through a digital photo gallery, her voice booming across the small, enclosed cafe with an arrogant, bragging tone that made my stomach drop. "Oh, you have absolutely no idea, Brenda. It is pure, unadulterated luxury," Stacy's aunt gushed, her fingers flicking across the screen. "Stacy's mother is absolutely living like absolute royalty in Italy right now. She's texting me these photos every single morning from the private terrace. Look at this view of the Positano Cliffs." Brendan paid for the entire thing out of his own pocket. He booked business-class flights for her mother, Stacy, her sisters, and both of the boyfriends. Every single expense is covered. He rented this jaw-dropping multi-million-dollar cliffside villa with a private chef who cooks them fresh seafood every night. It cost him a fortune, easily $50,000 for the entire week, But Brendan was just so desperate to completely impress Stacy's family and prove he could provide that level of luxury. He's such a generous boy. The woman named Brenda gasped in admiration. Wow, that is incredible. But wait, how did he manage to leave his own mother behind? Didn't Nora always want to go to Italy? Stacy's aunt let out another sharp, dismissive chuckle, waving her hand in the air as if swatting away a fly. Oh please, they completely handled that. They told his mother that Brendan was stuck at a grueling corporate business seminar in Chicago. They deliberately chose a destination where they knew she couldn't just drop in, and they explicitly agreed to keep it a total secret so Nora wouldn't beg to come along and ruin the family dynamic. Stacy made everyone swear a blood oath not to post a single photo on social media until they get back. They literally laughed about it at the airport. Stacy's mother said it was the perfect crime because Nora is so clueless, she's probably at home right now cooking meals for their freezer.
My heart didn't just skip a beat, it shattered into millions of jagged, ice-cold fragments inside my chest. I stood absolutely frozen behind a large display rack of cashmere garments in the attached boutique corner. The entire cafe spinning violently around me. The air in my lungs felt thick like hot lead. Every single word Stacy's aunt spoke echoed in my mind, a devastating chorus of betrayal. The absolute, calculated cruelty of it took my breath away. The intricate pieces of the puzzle instantly fell into place with terrifying mathematical precision. My son was not broke, he was not struggling, he was not drowning in corporate anxiety. He was independently wealthy enough to casually drop $50,000 to fund a high-class, multi-person European vacation for his wife's entire extended family. And how had he managed to free up that cash? Because I, his naive, fiercely protective mother, had been funding his daily existence. I had been paying for his luxury SUV insurance, absorbing his massive electrical bills, and buying his high-end groceries. Completely blind to the fact that my maternal love was being actively weaponized against me. I was the financial engine enabling my own exclusion. My hands were shaking so violently that I almost dropped my leather handbag. I stumbled out of the boutique line, avoiding the aunt's line of sight, and collapsed onto a stone bench just outside the plaza's entrance. My chest heaved as I pulled my smartphone out of my pocket. My vision was blurred with hot tears of pure shock, but I forced myself to navigate to the family tracking application built into our operating systems. Years ago, when Brendan was in college, we had set up a permanent, unconditional location sharing loop so we could always ensure each other's safety. In his rush to execute this elaborate deception, neither he nor Stacy had thought to turn it off. They truly believed I was too technologically incompetent to ever check it. I tapped on Brendan's contact profile. The screen loading wheel spun for a fraction of a second, and then the map zoomed completely out. Leaving the United States behind entirely, it crossed the vast blue expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, hovering directly over Western Europe, before dropping a bright, unforgiving blue dot directly onto the Amalfi coast of Italy. Specifically, it placed him at a luxury 5-star cliffside resort sector in Positano. I zoomed in further and further until I could see the exact street name, the exact coastline layout, and the exact proximity to the Mediterranean Sea. There it was. Black and white, indisputable, irrefutable. The digital proof of a knife planted firmly in my back by my own flesh and blood. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow to the sternum. The boy I had spent 35 years protecting, the boy whose feverish nights I had stayed up monitoring, the boy whose tears I had wiped away when his father Hugh died, had looked me dead in the eyes, smiled, and lied to me with the sociopathic ease of a seasoned criminal. He had taken my lifelong dream, the one dream he knew inside and out, and handed it on a silver platter to a family who openly despised my existence. He had allowed his wife and her mother to transform his own mother into a laughingstock, an absolute clown who was currently paying his utility bills while they toasted champagne glasses under the Italian sun. I didn't cry out. I didn't storm back into the cafe to cause a dramatic scene. I slowly stood up, my posture instantly straightening. I walked through the parking lot toward my car, the cold autumn wind hitting my face. With every step I took toward my vehicle, the paralyzing sadness inside me began to evaporate, replaced by a burning, white-hot, diamond-hard rage. 60 is not the age where you sit quietly in a rocking chair and allow yourself to be emotionally discarded by the people you birthed. 60 is not the age where you accept being treated as a financial convenience. I turned the key in my ignition, my mind racing at 100 miles per hour, completely organizing a counter-strategy. If Brendan could afford a luxury European vacation for 6 adults while mooching off my insurance payments, he certainly didn't need my financial charity. More importantly, he no longer deserved my legacy. The white brick colonial house on Willow Creek Lane was completely paid off. There was no mortgage, no outstanding liens, and it was held entirely 100% in my legal name. For the last 5 years, I had continually promised Brendan that this magnificent house would be his entire inheritance. I had already drafted a comprehensive legal will, leaving the property to him entirely. Brendan and Stacey knew this. In fact, they openly spoke about it during our rare family dinners. Stacey would frequently make passive-aggressive comments about how they couldn't wait to move into the Willow Creek property, how they were going to completely gut my traditional kitchen, tear down my vintage wallpaper, and remodel the entire structure into a minimalist, ultra-modern white box once I finally did the smart thing and moved into a smaller, cheaper retirement condo downtown. They thought I was weak. They thought 60 meant fragile, dependent, and naive. They viewed me as a temporary caretaker of their future property. As I pulled my car into the long paved driveway of Willow Creek Lane, I stepped out, looked up at the beautiful, majestic structure, and realized a profound truth. This house was no longer a home. It was a golden chain tying me to a toxic, ungrateful son who viewed my death as a real estate opportunity. It was time to break the chain. I walked into my quiet kitchen, sat down at the mahogany table, and immediately dialed a direct number for Janice. Janice was a legendary, high-stakes real estate broker who operated exclusively in the ultra-luxury residential market of our affluent county. For the past 18 months, she had periodically called me, practically begging me to list my property because she had an influx of wealthy corporate executives from New York City who were desperate to buy historic, pristine colonials on Willow Creek Lane. "Hi, Janice," I said, my voice completely devoid of tremor, sounding as cold and steady as an ice sheet. "I'm calling to find out if your buyers are still desperate for my property. I am ready to sell the Willow Creek house, but I have strict, non-negotiable conditions. If you can bring me a fully verified, all-cash buyer who is willing to sign a waiver of inspection and execute a lightning-fast 30-day closing, the property is theirs. But this transaction must be entirely private. I want absolutely no public listing on the internet, no real estate signs planted in my front yard, and absolutely zero open houses. Quiet, lightning-fast, and final. Can you do it?" On the other end of the line, I could hear Janice's intake of breath. She knew the value of my home was easily in the 7-figure range. "Nora, if your home is in the same immaculate condition it was last spring, I have a corporate relocation executive who will buy it sight unseen for cash by tomorrow morning. Consider it done."
Janice proved to be an absolute unmitigated professional powerhouse. Within 48 hours of our phone conversation, while my son Brendan was busy clinking glasses of limoncello on a sun-drenched terrace in Positano and actively composing completely fabricated text messages to me about boring corporate strategy seminars in Chicago, a multi-millionaire corporate buyer conducted a highly confidential 40-minute private walkthrough of my residence. They were completely spellbound by the pristine hardwood floors, the historic crown moulding, and the absolute privacy of the acreage. True to Janice's word, they submitted an all-cash offer that was a staggering 10% over the current market appraisal value. Their only core stipulation was that the property had to be completely vacated, cleaned, and handed over within exactly 3 weeks. I signed the legal binding contract with a custom gold pen, and I did not shed a single solitary tear. The moment the digital ink dried on those legal documents, I immediately contacted my longtime family estate attorney, Felix. I sat in Felix's plush oak-panelled office downtown, my expression entirely unreadable. "Felix," I stated calmly, "I want to completely revoke the existing will I drafted 5 years ago. I want my son Brendan entirely removed as a beneficiary of my estate. Instead, I want the entirety of my wealth and assets split between charitable foundations and my daughter, Lena, who has always shown genuine integrity. Furthermore, Felix,
I want a comprehensive power of attorney structure updated so that no medical or financial decisions regarding my life can ever be influenced by Brendan or his spouse, Stacey. Felix looked up from his glasses, slightly taken aback by my sudden coldness. Nora, are you absolutely certain about this? This is a permanent and severe shift in your estate planning. Removing Brendan will cause a permanent rift. I have never been more certain of anything in my entire life, Felix, I replied without a single second of hesitation. My son has decided that I am a ghost. I am simply finalizing the paperwork to match his reality. Once the legal paperwork with Felix was sealed, I immediately contracted the services of a high-end, full-service residential relocation and liquidation company. I systematically went through my home of 35 years with an absolute, detached sense of surgical precision. I kept my deeply personal family heirlooms, my late husband Hugh's military medals and old photo albums, my grandmother's vintage silver set, a few deeply cherished pieces of antique furniture that held genuine emotional value. Everything else, every couch, every guest bed, every high-end appliance, every piece of decor that Stacey had already earmarked for her future modern remodel, was systematically catalogued to be sold at an exclusive estate liquidation auction or donated to a regional women's shelter. During those 3 excruciating weeks of intense packing and logistical coordination, my smartphone continually lit up with a series of sickeningly sweet, entirely fraudulent text updates from Brendan. Hey Mom, just wrapped up a massive, grueling 6-hour presentation here in Chicago. One text message read, the weather here is absolutely terrible. It's pouring rain and freezing. Genuinely miss you and your home-cooked meals, Mom. Stacey and I are so exhausted. But we're pushing through. We'll call you the very second our flight lands back in Connecticut next week. I would sit on a packed cardboard box in my increasingly empty living room, read his pathetic, calculated lies, and reply with absolute, monotone simplicity. Stay completely focused on your corporate work, Brendan. Do what you have to do. See you very soon. It was an absolute masterpiece of psychological deception on his end, born from a lifetime of assuming his mother was too soft to ever question him. But little did my son know, my defensive countermove was already fully executed. The legal closing went through with absolute, seamless perfection at the title company's office. The money, a massive, life-altering, mid-7-figure sum of pure liquid cash, was securely, permanently wired into a brand new private wealth management bank account that I had opened at an entirely different institution, an account to which only I held the legal access keys. I then immediately moved into a highly exclusive, fully serviced luxury, high-rise apartment complex located directly in the vibrant downtown district. My new home featured panoramic, floor-to-ceiling glass windows with a breathtaking view of the entire city skyline, a 24-hour private security detail, an elite concierge service, and a beautiful outdoor terrace. It was a space designed for a woman who was entering the most powerful, unburdened chapter of her life on the exact Tuesday morning that my son, his wife, and his entitled in-laws were scheduled to board their business class flight back from Europe to the United States. The historic house on Willow Creek Lane was completely, utterly hollow. It was a ghost town of empty rooms and bare walls. The heavy brass keys were officially, legally handed over to the ecstatic new owners. I walked through the completely empty, echoing hallways one final time. I stood in the doorway of the bedroom that used to belong to Brendan when he was a boy, and instead of feeling a wave of crippling nostalgia or sadness, I felt a profound, exhilarating sense of absolute weightlessness. I was no longer the lonely, grieving widow sitting by a silent phone on Willow Creek Lane, desperately waiting for a crumb of attention from an ungrateful son who viewed me as a financial utility. I was an exceptionally wealthy, completely independent, sovereign woman with the entire globe ahead of her. I locked the front door, drove my car to my brand new luxury high-rise apartment, poured myself a crystal flute of incredibly expensive vintage French champagne, sat down on my leather sofa overlooking the city, and patiently waited for the fireworks to begin. I knew with absolute certainty what Brendan's post-vacation routine was. He always drove directly to my house, straight from the international airport, to drop off his heavy extra luggage, check his mail, and raid my refrigerator for free food before heading to his own townhouse.
At exactly 6:30 p.m., Right on schedule, the quiet air of my new luxury apartment was pierced by the loud, aggressive ringing of my smartphone. It was Brendan. I sat perfectly still, taking a slow, deliberate sip of my champagne, and allowed the phone to ring out completely until it hit voicemail. Within 90 seconds, the phone began to ring again, vibrating violently against the marble countertop. This time, Stacy's name flashed across the digital caller ID screen. I ignored her completely as well. Then, within a span of 3 minutes, a chaotic, frantic barrage of text messages began to flood my notification center, the screen lighting up like a digital Christmas tree. Mom, where on earth are you? There are total strangers inside the house. The first text from Brendan screamed. The front door locks are completely changed. All of your furniture is missing. The living room is completely bare. What is happening here? Are you okay? Did you get hurt? I waited an additional 10 minutes, allowing the panic, confusion, and realization to completely marinate on their end. Finally, I picked up the device, dialed Brendan's number back, and immediately placed the call on speakerphone. Setting the device down on the marble island, the connection clicked open instantly. Brendan's voice, cut through the speaker, sounding completely frantic, breathless, hysterically high-pitched, and laced with absolute unadulterated panic. Mom! Oh my God, thank heaven you finally picked up the phone. I am standing inside the driveway of the house right now. There is a massive moving truck parked outside. And there's a strange couple in the kitchen saying they literally just bought the entire property. Where are you? Did you get severely scammed by an internet hacker? Did someone completely steal the house out from under you? What is going on? Nobody scammed me, Brendan, I said, my voice incredibly low, measured, and completely calm, creating a terrifying contrast to his manic hysteria. I sold the house myself. The property now legally and permanently belongs to a lovely young executive couple who relocated from New York City. There was a dead, absolute, suffocating silence on the phone line for 3 long, agonizing seconds. I could literally hear the wind blowing through the trees back at Willow Creek Lane. Then suddenly, Stacy's voice barked fiercely in the background, slicing through the silence like a rusty blade, her tone dripping with sharp, unentitled rage. What do you mean you sold it, Nora? That was our house. You promised that house to Brendan for years. We already had the blueprints drawn up for the kitchen renovation. Where is all of our furniture? Where is the money from the sale? The money is completely secure inside my own private high-yield wealth management account, Stacy, I replied with a smooth, terrifyingly polite smile that carried through the phone line. And as for exactly why I decided to sell my property, well, I recently had a profound epiphany that life is incredibly short, and luxury vacations are exceptionally expensive. I figured since Brendan had an abundance of disposable wealth to casually fly your entire maternal family to Positano, Italy, business class, and rent a multi-million-dollar cliffside villa for 2 weeks, he certainly had absolutely no practical need for my inheritance or my real estate. The phone line went utterly, completely ice-cold. I could hear Brendan let out a sharp, ragged gasp of air, his entire confident demeanor instantly collapsing into a pathetic, desperate, trembling whine. Mom? Who on earth told you about that? Mom, please listen to me. It wasn't what it looks like at all. Stacy's mother was going through an incredibly dark emotional patch. She really needed a vacation to reset, and we honestly thought you wouldn't enjoy the Amalfi Coast anyway. There are just too many steep stone stairs and hills for a woman of your advanced age. Dr. Ingram even said last year you need to watch your joints. We did it for your own safety, Mom. We were trying to protect you from getting exhausted. Do not dare to bring Dr. Ingram's medical advice into your pathetic lies, Brendan, I interrupted, cutting him off instantly with a sharp, ironclad, commanding tone that he had not heard since he was a small child. Ingram confirmed just today that I am in immaculate health. Do not dare to insult my intelligence further by wrapping your toxic deceit in the flag of concern for my health. You used my pure, unconditional maternal kindness. You allowed me to buy your groceries, pay your luxury car insurance, and absorb your utility bills like a fool, all while you took the exact money I saved you and used it to fund a lavish $50,000 lifestyle for a group of people who treat me like an invisible inconvenience. You lied to my face, week after week, creating elaborate fairy tales about Chicago business seminars, just so you could keep me excluded from my own lifelong dream. I stood up from my bar stool, looking out at the magnificent glittering evening lights of the city skyline from my high-rise window. You consciously made your choice, Brendan. You chose your new family, and you chose to treat the mother who built your entire life as an unwanted piece of garbage. Lena was right about you all along, so I have officially decided to treat you like an absolute stranger. Do not attempt to come to my new residential address. Security will not allow you past the lobby. Do not dare call me asking for a single cent of financial assistance when your credit card bills for Italy finally arrive. Enjoy every single memory you made in Positano, my son. Because those are officially the most expensive memories you will ever possess in your lifetime. They cost you your childhood home, they cost you your inheritance, and they cost you your mother. Goodbye, Brendan. Mom. Wait. Please, Mom. Don't do this, Brendan cried out, his voice cracking with genuine terror as the financial and familial reality of his actions crashed down on him. Without another syllable, I tapped the red end call button on my screen. I immediately navigated to my contacts, opened Brendan's profile and permanently blocked his number. I did the exact same for Stacey, part 5. The falling dominoes, the fallout within Brendan and Stacey's household over the next 48 hours was spectacular, and although I had blocked them, the echoes of their domestic disaster reached me through my oldest and dearest lifelong friend, Pauline. Pauline had no stake in the drama, but she lived 2 houses down from their townhouse and loved to keep me informed over our morning tea. According to Pauline, Brendan and Stacey had not just spent their extra savings on that extravagant Italian vacation. They had maxed out 2 high-limit credit cards, under the absolute assumption that my upcoming winter allowance check and my financial safety net would completely cover their residential expenses when they returned. Brendan's corporate bonus hadn't cleared at the level he expected, and because they had relied so heavily on my ongoing generosity to keep their heads above water, the sudden and complete removal of my financial support hit them like an economic tidal wave. Nora, you wouldn't believe the chaos. Pauline told me over the phone, her voice filled with disbelief. Lena actually drove over to their townhouse yesterday. She didn't hold back at all. Lena told Stacey right to her face that her greed had finally ruined everything, and she told Brendan he got exactly what he deserved for betraying you. The neighbours could hear the screaming matches from down the block. Brendan is furious at Stacey for pushing him to lie to you, and Stacey is screaming at him because they are now completely broke. But the final, desperate act of this family drama took place on Thursday afternoon. I was sitting in the elegant, marble-floored lobby of my new luxury high-rise apartment complex, speaking softly with the head concierge about my upcoming travel arrangements. The glass double doors of the building suddenly slid open, and Stacey's mother marched inside like a tornado wrapped in a designer trench coat. Her face was flushed, bright red with sheer fury, her eyes scanning the lobby until they locked directly onto me. "Nora," she bellowed, her voice echoing off the high ceilings, instantly drawing the attention of the security staff. "You absolute, cold-hearted, spiteful woman. How dare you do this to your own child? How dare you ruin Brendan's life over a simple vacation miscommunication? You have completely destroyed their financial stability. You sold a house that was supposed to secure your son's future, just to satisfy your pathetic, bitter ego." I did not flinch. I did not stand up. I remained perfectly seated in my leather armchair, looking up at her with an expression of pure, unbothered detachment. "Stacey's mother," I said, my tone incredibly quiet, smooth, and razor-sharp, "you are currently standing on private property, making a fool of yourself in front of professional security guards, who are trained to remove trespassers. Let me make something entirely clear to your microscopic mind. Brendan's future was completely secured by my love and my late husband Hugh's hard work, but your family taught my son that deception was a virtue. You taught him that his mother was a bank account to be drained and a ghost to be hidden away." She took a step closer, her hands shaking as she gestured wildly. "It was just a trip, Nora. We didn't think it would kill you to miss one vacation. You are a lonely old woman. You have nothing else to do with your money anyway. Brendan owes his loyalty to his wife now, not to you." I slowly stood up, my posture tall and regal, completely dwarfing her frantic, chaotic energy. I looked her directly in the eyes. Brendan owed his loyalty to the truth. "And as for my money, Felix has already ensured that it is completely protected. It does not belong to Stacey, and it certainly does not belong to you. I am no longer funding your family's delusions of grandeur." You wanted a wealthy son-in-law so badly? Well, now you have a son-in-law who is $50,000 in debt and drowning in a mortgage he can't pay. I hope the photos from Positano look beautiful on your wall, because they are the only luxury you will ever get from my family. I turned my head slightly to the chief security officer who was already standing 2 feet away. Marcus, please remove this loud, uninvited woman from the premises immediately. If she ever sets foot near the property line again, please file a formal trespassing injunction with Felix. Right away, Miss Nora, Marcus replied with a respectful nod. He stepped firmly between us, his massive frame completely blocking her view of me. Ma'am, you need to turn around and exit the building immediately, or we will have the city police department transport you out. Stacy's mother opened and closed her mouth like a fish gasping for air. She looked around the ultra-luxury lobby, realizing that she had absolutely no power here, no leverage, and no voice. With a sharp, embarrassed huff, she turned on her heels and scurried out the glass doors into the cold afternoon air. Completely defeated, I walked back over to the concierge desk, adjusting the cuffs of my silk blouse. Now, as we were discussing, Louis, please ensure my private car service is booked for 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. I have a first-class flight to catch, of course, Miss Nora. Louis smiled warmly, typing the details into his terminal. May I ask where you are traveling to? I looked out the massive glass windows, watching the city lights begin to flicker alive under the twilight sky. I took a deep, clear breath, feeling the absolute beauty of total freedom. I am flying directly to Rome, Louis, I said, my voice filled with a quiet, triumphant joy. And then I am taking a long private car down the Amalfi Coast. Pauline and Lena are meeting me there next week. I hear the views of the Mediterranean are absolutely spectacular this time of year. And thanks to Dr. Ingram's great health report, I don't mind the stairs at all.